Hello, everyone. We're a small but hardy and resilient bunch who are live, but I hope lots and lots of people will watch the recording because we've got some fantastic results to share with you today of the Mini Musicians project that the Merton Music Foundation undertook over the last couple of years. I think it's true to say that, and David's here, of course, that actually the results really exceeded all our expectations. It was a great, enormously enjoyable project to be part of, to see so many children engaging in music so enthusiastically. But the big sets of data that we managed to get from all the children and the staff and the schools really do show that music has had this amazing impact in a number of areas. So thank you for joining, and I think David's going to kick off.
Yeah, so I'm picking up. Hopefully, you can see something.
We can, yeah.
Great. Yeah. So, just going to reintroduce the Mini Musicians program to people that might have heard of it before, and introduce it to those that haven't. Mini Musicians has been a partnership project that we've been delivering for a number of years now, as Merton Music Foundation, independent charity music service in Southwest London, with funding from Merton Council, working with University of Roehampton, Sounds of Intent, Trinity College London, and Sing Up. It's been a really real partnership effort. So it started in September 2023, and the original pilot program ran until July 2025. And we're currently in the process of delivering a legacy program in the current academic year, which is 25, 26. And we were looking at early childhood musical development. So we were particularly working in the early years and Key Stage 1. And in the pilot program, we worked in 10 Merton primary and special schools with around 650 children to deliver general musicianship and classroom instrumental learning. And we were focusing on the melodica. So we tracked children across this 2-year program from year 1 up into year 2, taught them skills in year 1 that then led on to playing and learning to play the melodica in year 2. And alongside that, Adam and Sarah and colleagues from Roehampton undertook a research study of around 230 or so of the Key Stage 1 children taking part in the programme, and then another 70 or so children who weren't taking part in the programme. So we had a comparison. This is the results of that study that we're going to start to hear today. And just the whole programme was designed in response to an assessed need locally, which was around lack of school readiness, children and young people not being ready for school socially, emotionally, in terms of their cognitive development, and that being fed back by head teachers, but also a need locally of inequality of access to instrumental learning, and trying to balance that. And at the end of the second year, all of the year 2 children, around 250 children, were put forward in both mainstream and special schools for a Trinity ACMD award, which is based on the Sounds of Intent, which is what we used to design the program. We set off with 5 principles, pedagogical principles, and chief amongst those was joy. However, I think some of the research findings will start to explore the maximize value principle, which was that we were trying to eke the most out of every single aspect of the pedagogy that we're delivering. And one of the ways that that manifested was by using a fixed DOE approach in certain aspects of the program. So I'll leave that to Adam and Sarah to draw out in a little bit. Just to give you an idea of what this looked like in schools, we were working with a team of 5 tutors, and each tutor was delivering in 1 or more schools across the week a full day of provision just in the early years and Key Stage 1. Our target cohort was the year 1 going into year 2 cohort. So this year's the current academic year, year 3. And we followed those year 1s up into year 2 and prioritized those children for half class teaching and 45-minute lessons. And then we built the timetable around that so that other children in the lower year groups received either 30 or 45-minute, typically whole class sessions. And we also delivered a weekly big sing. So where all of those children in early years and Key Stage 1 came together for just to sing for the joy of singing. And a lot of the Sing Up material came through then. Each school had its own very bespoke timetable, depending on its number of form of entry and the the specific arrangements for that school. And there's an example there of a timetable of a school that had an additionally resource provision in it called Treetops. And so that's how we did the timetable in that particular school, but it was very different in each setting. We bespoke in each setting. One of the things that was really special about Mini Musicians is we found with that timetabling format, we still, in most schools, had around 30 or 45 minutes left to play with. And we used that for what we called small group interventions. That was entirely flexible time that was led by the practitioner in the school. They decided how to use that time. Often it was to pre-teach the next week's lessons to children with additional needs. So they had a bit of a head start, or sometimes it might have been to stretch and develop children who had shown some real progress during that current week, or occasionally it was used as to deliver a separate program of study for specific children who needed an adapted approach, either behaviorally or socially or academically, were finding it too difficult in the larger group settings, and having that flexibility for the practitioner to design a bespoke program for those children was really, really beneficial. Just briefly on the scheme of learning, it was something that we put together from scratch with one of our practitioners, Julie Luck, who's a fantastic early years and Key Stage 1 practitioner, and she worked really closely with Adam to design a scheme of learning based on the sounds of intent that was very progressive, very small steps learning, and very accessible. One of the aims of the program was that whilst it was specialist practitioner delivery in pilot, that we wanted it to be able to be picked up and used by non-specialists as well. So it's a really accessible program. Lots of use of color that was consistent throughout. So we color coded notes consistently. Moving away from the color coding as we got onto the melodicas, the learning started with singing, percussion, pitched instruments like chime bars. We moved on to melodicas, glockenspiels, and then by year 2 that then progressed onto the melodica. So there was a real progression, and we used an oracy informed approach. We had a hunch that teaching children really, really good music early on would help their speech and language development, and I think we're about to find out that it looks like it did. But we also explicitly used oracy strategies in our teaching that we worked closely with the Merton Council oracy team to develop a kind of code of conduct and how we approached oracy in our teaching. So that was very explicitly delivered in the program. That's an intro to Mini Musicians. If there's any questions now, I can take them, but otherwise I will hand over to Adam and or Sarah to talk us through the results.
Right, this is Adam, not Sarah, talking. Hello. Probably just worth saying that this is the English system. So early years foundation stage was kind of 4 years old, rising 5, and Key Stage 1 is 5 to 7, basically. So children in early childhood, broadly conceived. Merton it's not in central London, but it's in southwest London, and so it's still very much a strongly urban area. And the pie charts you can see show the kind of mix that I think, David, would be typical of schools within a London borough, with a high number of children needing special educational needs, disability support within school, and a rather smaller proportion, but still very significant, having education, health and care plans. So those are children who need support above and beyond what the school can provide. But you can see from the number of children who had free school meals, for example, which is a proxy indicator of social deprivation, a large number of children who had English as an additional language, pupil premium as another proxy indicator of need. So around 25% of all the children had additional needs, and a very, very broad ethnic mix, which again is, I mean, it's one of the joys, I think, of working in schools within the city, is that they are really rainbow coalitions with the most amazing fusion of people from all over the world in terms of cultural backgrounds, and it's magical, I think, when they all come together. So the quantitative data, we did a baseline assessment with 3 additional music assessments. We looked at academic data, attendance data, and demographic data, which I've just been talking about. Very important too to put the kind of, I guess, quantitative data tells you what and how much. Very important on top of that, the qualitative data, which tells you why and people's feelings about things and their views, which is which kind of makes sense of the quantitative data. And Sarah led on that through observations, interviews, school visits, and a questionnaire. On to the next slide, please, sir. So here's some of the musical development outcomes. So we've done on these graphs, we split them into three groups. So one is the comparison group, which is in red, and then the mini musicians groups we divided into no SEND and SEND. So we have three categories. So what this tells you, along the vertical axis, you've got sounds of intent levels, and we're looking at level 4, which is kind of motifs, things like call and response. And level 4 is divided into emerging, achieving, and excelling. So there are 3 subcategories within that. At level 5, emerging, children are starting to be able to sing and play whole songs in time and in tune. It's interesting to note that the comparison schools children started at a lower musical level than those in the intervention group. That's nothing, it's just an artifact of the fact that we chose random scores. So there's nothing significant in that. The really important thing for me is the fact that the children with SEND actually made swifter progress than either of the other groups, the no SEND mini musicians and the comparison group. And it just shows the huge importance of music with that group. But the no SEND mini musicians also grew and so remained at a higher level of attainment, moving from sounds of intent level 4 emerging to level 4 excelling and on to level 5. Cool. One of the fascinating things for me, which David hinted at, was this use of a fixed do. So I had a strong belief that sometimes it's possible to miss a trick. If, for example, every time children sing a song, they sing it at a slightly different pitch, then we're actually missing out on a learning experience. Whereas by teaching songs always at a standard pitch, the belief from some research, limited research, was that this would help the children internalize pitch more strongly. And quite astonishing, actually, by doing this consistently, almost 4 out of 5 children developed this internal pitch awareness. What that meant was that when they came to play the melodica, the children could hear the notes in their head before they actually touched the keys, which is a fantastic thing. Sound before sign, if you like. It just means that they have a strong internal pitch image of what they want to play. And this reflected itself in the 3 test songs that we did, which were easy, moderate, and difficult. Broadly speaking, consistently, the children who didn't have SEND achieved slightly higher on the whole than those with SEND. But very importantly, a significant proportion of the children who did have special needs managed to do, in some cases, better, or at least as well as the other children. So the assumption that if you're in a special school or a unit, for example, that perhaps learning a melody instrument isn't for you is really quite wrong. And I think we all feel very strongly that all children can make music, can learn to play instruments, irrespective of any academic, social, or other challenges they may face. Thank you very much. So these are slightly more complicated graphs, and I hope we will send the slides around so you can look at them in more detail. But the key thing from these trends is that children in the intervention group without SEND made improvements in reading and maths in particular, so the oracy and the numeracy. Children with SEND made significant improvements in maths, and the same kind of improvements weren't observed in children in the comparison group. So you can see that our goal of supporting oracy in particular was achieved in the intervention group, the children who had the program, but also the maths thing was a really important too. There's a sort of mistaken belief that children find maths more difficult, numeracy more difficult than literacy. Um, and teachers often struggle, I think, because they think they find maths difficult and they find strategies difficult. Well, here is one strategy that teachers can use. I expect Sarah will say more about that, and she's doing a PhD in it at the moment. And the next slide. Again, complex graphs, which we'll leave with you. So we've got the associations in maths and oracy. Interestingly, we have a strong link between rhythmic development and mathematical attainment. And here we've got literacy gains, especially for pupils with SEND. But bear in mind, these are correlational rather than causal. So we can't say for sure because the life is too complicated. The child's life has many, many factors in it. But what we can say is that as children improve musically, those that improved most strongly musically through the intervention tended to improve most strongly in other areas. So that's a strong hint that the intervention really did have a very positive impact. Next slide. Sarah.
Actually, David, could you just go back one? Because I was going to just, if it's helpful, share with people some reasons why we think this might be the case.
Yeah, indeed.
So I guess there are a couple of things to think about. One is that the Mini Musicians program, from what David showed you at the beginning, it used a lot of visual spatial referencing for children. So they were able to hear sound patterns through the singing and the fixed do, and to fix those auditory patterns in their minds. And then they were given visual spatial clues as to how to map those patterns onto instruments, and therefore were able to see patterns visually. And we've been doing some other research at Roehampton purely focused on how sound patterns relate to children's visual spatial pattern understanding. And we think that there is a link. This work's only pilot sort of study work at the moment, but it's showing some strong evidence for the fact that when you show children, or when you allow children to combine hearing patterns and seeing patterns, it increases their overall understanding. And I think that's one of the things that could have been happening in the Mini Musicians program. And then another sort of area of research that we have been examining and analysing is some children, particularly those from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and I would hypothesise also children with special educational needs and disabilities, rely more on visual spatial processing in subjects like maths. So there have been some brain imaging studies where they've asked children to look at subtraction problems within an MRI machine, and then they've mapped their brain activity. And what they can see is that children from low-income backgrounds use lots of areas of the brain that rely on visual spatial processing, and children from high-income backgrounds rely on their verbal processing skills to solve maths problems. So again, that's kind of a theoretical explanation as to what might be going on underneath some of these observations and the associations that we can see. But I think it's something that I think is really worth us examining further. And as Adam said, that's certainly one of the things I'm looking to do in my PhD. Shall we move on to talk about the additional impacts that were observed? And actually, just before we move on to social or communication impacts, I'm just going to talk about oracy specifically, because whilst we didn't have any measures of oracy, so there aren't really any established measures for oracy so far being deployed in schools, what I did do through the qualitative research is asked practitioners how they perceived the programme had impacted pupils. And a very strong area of feedback was around children's oracy. So I think some of the oracy-informed strategies that we used within the Mini Musicians programme, such as using sentence starters, allowed children, when they came back into class and they were doing oracy sessions, they were already primed and understood what was being expected of them. I think there were wider impacts as well of the programme, which you can start to see on this slide. So children's or practitioners reported pretty much everybody I spoke to talked about how pupils' confidence had improved through the program. And that was kind of attributed to needing to work together in small groups, needing to listen to each other, having the opportunity to speak out and to kind of offer their voice in a kind of non-academic session and group collaboration. So that was a huge finding across the qualitative analysis we were doing. I think one of the other highlights was that the music program really offered children who may not have been as willing to speak in other classes to communicate in a different way. So you can see some quotes on the right-hand side of this slide from practitioners, both music specialists and education practitioners, sort of highlighting the fact that particularly SEND pupils use the way music as a way of communicating with each other and staff. And there were lots of really nice examples practitioners gave of pupils who were potentially or were mainly non-speaking in sort of normal class time, and in mini musicians they were able to sing and sing complete songs, and that they were also starting to talk to their peers in the playground, which is really powerful for those children. There are lots of reports of positive effects on attention and behavior and self-regulation. And I think, again, the amount of listening and attention that children had to pay to each other in listening to the notes and each other singing really transferred back into classrooms. And I think this overall sense of community, so singing together, I think, and bringing both practitioners and pupils together in big sing activities really supported this enhanced idea of kind of belonging and being engaged as a class, which is really powerful. Go to the next slide, David. Thank you. And the other big finding was the amount of practitioner development that occurred through the program. And this was both for, this was across kind of the practitioners involved. So for the music specialists, I think the program had really offered different techniques and ways of teaching music that music practitioners were already applying in their work outside of the mini musicians program. Things like fixed do, the ways to teach rhythm were all highlighted as really increasing their music pedagogy. And additionally, education practitioners, both teaching assistants and teachers, were really inspired by the program. So it was seen as a huge opportunity for skills transfer. As you can see from these quotes, things like, somebody showing us what to do and being a role model, feeling like, they could understand how to implement the program and to continue the mini musicians' legacy within schools. And also, I think the activities around inclusive music provision was massively supportive, both of specialist music practitioners teaching, but also classroom teachers thinking about how they were going to apply it to other subject areas and classroom time. And I think certainly I walked away with this very strong idea that it was built a really strong legacy in terms of continuing to work with the principles of the scheme once the scheme had ended, both for the music specialists, but also for the schools involved. Thank you, David. Adam, do you want to pick this one up?
Means unmuting. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, I mean, four main findings, I think. One, that early, and I think early is the key word, early sustained music education really does deliver musical, academic and social benefits. Our inclusive approach that was embedded right from the start in the design of the activities was effective across children who had the 25% who had special educational needs or disabilities, across those who had English as an additional language and other disadvantaged groups. importantly, I think for David and Merton and the council is that the model proved to be scalable and cost effective. And more broadly, as a policy position, it supports positioning music as a core component of early childhood education, which is something we all passionately believe, that it's really good to have some evidence of it. As ever, I don't know if it's the same in other countries, but certainly in the UK, there's a tendency to see the arts, music as nice to have. What we're saying is that music, particularly in early childhood, really is a core component of learning, socialization, and emotional regulation. And we should put it at the heart of everything we do. Thank you.
So I'd just talk a bit about the end of the program and the legacy, what's going on now. I mentioned earlier, so we put 230 children forward for an Awards and Certificate of Musical Development, ACMD, accreditation. So it's the largest cohort ever to be put forward for these relatively new inclusive exams. The exams are based on observation and very much designed to be fully inclusive and appropriate for use in a range of settings, including in PMLD environments. But we chose to apply them as well in this mainstream setting at Key Stage 1, as well as in the special schools and additionally resource provisions that we were working in. And what was lovely is that because the programme was built around the Sounds of Intent, and because we were tracking throughout the programme people's progress on the Sounds of Intent, every single child across the board was able to celebrate their progress and their success with an ACMD. So truly an inclusive outcome for the Year 2 children that were in that project. And just a really lovely thing to be the biggest cohort ever. And in terms of the legacy and how that's playing out, so we're in the legacy year at the moment. We're a term and a half into delivering our Mini Musicians Legacy program. So we took on 4 new schools to the project this year, and the Merton Council continued the funding this year to subsidise access for those schools. So the council's picking up about 60-70% of the cost of the delivery, making it accessible to those schools. They're having a slightly, because of the funding cycle, they're having a slightly shortened project of 1 year initially, and we're hoping that this report will help us secure some more funding. 6 of the 10 original schools that we worked in have also continued on the program on a professional development and learning program, and we're really lucky to have our lead practitioner Jen here with us today. So Jen is working in those 6 schools to support class teachers over the period of a year, to support class teachers to pick up the confidence and skills needed to carry on delivering the program next year on their own. If you're willing, Jen, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that's going, and the approach, the kind of the staggered approach to that.
Yeah, so we've taken a staggered approach. So last term was the model was that I would go in and model a lesson, and then the teachers would repeat the lesson the following week, either exactly as they'd seen it or with a few suggested variations to keep it fresh. And then we've so to just explain, so I go into each school every fortnight on a cycle. So they have a week with me and then a week without. And then this term we started to team teach, so slowly introducing parts of the lesson that the teachers either do with me or small parts on their own. That's where we are at the moment, and it's been interesting. So I think it's shown that there is a real need to support class teachers, non-specialists, to be able to deliver things like this. I think there's so much that we think is quite straightforward, and if you haven't had that training beforehand, I think teachers are actually finding it quite tricky. So just starting us off, something they've seen me do hundreds of times now, and when the teachers are being asked to do it, I think part of it is a confidence thing, but just having perhaps not really done it before. Lots of children, teachers at the beginning told us they weren't doing very regular music with their classes already. So that's where we are now. So I think I've done sort of 1 to 2 sessions of the team teaching. It's given me lots of information of what we need to work on, and I think there's kind of more than I thought we would need to do. It's where we're at now. And the idea is that in summer term, the teachers will be leading the sessions much more independently without the repetition. And we're going to hopefully deliver some training before then so everyone's as familiar with all the material as they can be. So it's generally going well. Lots of positive feedback. People are telling us that they've really gained in confidence already, which is good. But yeah, it feels like there's still quite a way to go before the summer to get everybody fully up and running. But it's been really great to be part of.
Thanks, Jim. We've had some really lovely feedback from the school as well. I'm actually sat in, our office is based in one of the mini musicians schools, and just the other day, one of the early years teachers popped her head around the door and told us how much she's enjoying working with Jen and developing her practice. So it's clearly having an impact. So well done. A couple of other legacies that have come from the project is the scheme of learning that we put together. We've made freely available. It's on our website. Anyone can download it that wants to. mmf.org.uk/mini-musicians. So it's there to download. We've actually got two variants of the scheme of learning. So the original scheme that we built was in partnership with SingUp, and so a lot of the resources on there you need a SingUp login to be able to access. But they're really, really high quality resources, and they support the learning really well. But in recognition that not every school in our borough has access to SingUp, we've made an adapted version where there are alternative, freely available on, in the public domain resources that can be used instead. And we've had to adapt because a lot of the way that the learning is based is that we start with the song, the act, whatever the piece is, and the activity builds from there. We've had to adapt the scheme quite significantly to make that work, but we felt it was an important step to make sure that there wasn't a cost barrier. There was a free option for everyone. So that's available on our website to download. And then we're also working again with Sounds of Intent and a professor from Anglia Ruskin University to try and automate the assessment methodology. So what Adam maybe forgot to mention was that to get to all this data that we've got all these nice graphs, we had to produce about 500 hours of video assessment of the children and young people, and those 500 hours of video had to be watched all the way through by a human being, and that human had to assess every aspect of each response to the children's pardon me, I'm trying to log in, each response to the children did to the stimuli. So we had a video stimuli that the children responded to, and that gave us a consistent set of data, but it was hugely time consuming and took up terabytes of data. So we're trying to find a way of automating that essentially a tablet or a computer would play the video activity. The child would respond, and the tablet, using its microphone, would pick up the child's response, interpret that, and then grade it against the Sounds of Intent to be able to give feedback to the practitioner, maybe a non-specialist, as to what level that child's working at. The intention behind that is to allow better baseline assessment and impact assessment of musical intervention in other settings, but also potentially to make it more accessible for more young people to celebrate their musical progress and development through the ACMD accreditation that's built on Sounds of Intent. So that's watch this space. We've got to actually get the science on that one sorted first. And that's the Mini Musicians project, and that's me, and that's Adam, and that's how you can get in touch with us. And the link there, mmf.org.uk/mini musicians, that's where you can download the scheme of learning and use it for yourself.